Let's go now to Anthony Lowenstein, who's a Middle East analyst and the author of My Israel Question. He was based in occupied East Jerusalem between 2016 and 2020, and he joins us now from Sydney, Australia. Good to have you back with us, Anthony. We saw that Itamar Ben Gvir essentially celebrating the fact that we've got 100,000 more guns in the arms of ordinary civilians in Israel. This is a recipe for disaster, surely.
It's a recipe for disaster, but it's worse than that because, of course, so many of these people, in fact, are settlers. So they're not, they're civilians perhaps and not necessarily full-time soldiers, but they live in the occupied Palestinian territories, namely the West Bank or around East Jerusalem. And an environment where, as you rightly say, the death toll is skyrocketing. Essentially what we have now, and this was the case before October 7, but it's worsened since, is deep daily collusion between settlers and soldiers. There is no difference. For as far as Palestinians are concerned, they're one and the same thing because they assist each other. So the idea that Ben Gvir, which he's been doing, is setting up essentially settler militias, not to protect settlers, but to essentially try to kick Palestinians off the land. It's a form of slow-moving ethnic cleansing. And it's happening often away from the international media because not that the media can get into Gaza, but the focus is principally Gaza, rightly so. But what's happening in the West Bank is frankly just as disturbing.
Yes, meantime, we've got the US President Joe Biden is finally speaking to Benjamin Netanyahu after a month of radio silence. Biden is becoming more outspoken publicly about calling for a ceasefire. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader from the Democrats, is also calling for fresh elections in Israel, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is no longer fit to lead the country. Do you think this has any bearing or will have any bearing on what the far-right government in Israel will do vis-a-vis this conflict?
I think it's pretty clear that what the US is trying to do is to pin any blame for the catastrophe in Gaza on one man, Netanyahu, which is frankly untrue. He's the Prime Minister. The responsibility, of course, lies with him. But I think a lot of people, including the US, are going to be very disappointed that when Netanyahu falls in a week or in a month or whenever it is, the likely replacement are going to be no different. Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, on the key issues, they're exactly the same because in the wider Israeli community and society, there's been a real radicalization of anti-Palestinian sentiment for years, long before October 7. So, for example, in the last weeks, public opinion polls in Israel find 2/3 of Israelis oppose sending in food aid to Gaza at a time where Palestinians are literally starving to death. So, look, the US is expressing greater concern, but as has often been said, words are cheap and words are frankly irrelevant. After 30 to 40,000 Palestinians killed, we need a lot more than simply talk because the weapons are still being sent to Israel. That's what matters. The weapons are not being stopped. There's no talk of an arms embargo by anyone, not the EU, not the US, and Palestinians have no one to protect them because the settlers and the soldiers work together as one.
Okay, Anthony Lowenstein, really good to get your analysis as always, and thanks so much again for joining us.